Welcome to today's Pacific West Mortgage Fund podcast. Our exciting topic today is title insurance. We're going to be interviewing a very knowledgeable attorney, Anthony Geraci, on this subject. Today's podcast is brought to you by the Granger Company, a full-service real estate company specializing in property management, sales, and leasing of industrial and commercial property in Southern California. So with that, we are talking about title insurance. There are 5 major title companies: First American, Fidelity, Old Republic, Chicago, and Stewart. Those 5 companies control about 75% of the marketplace. If you are buying a piece of property or lending on a piece of property, you are more than likely going to be dealing with one of these companies. Anthony is going to shed some light on what title policies are, how they work, how to collect, who should be helping you as a buyer on interfacing with the insurance company, what you should do to protect yourself and get what you're asking for from a title company. Oftentimes, if you're new to the real estate business, you may not understand how title policies work, what they even are, what they cover you for, what they don't cover you for, and how to get more for your money, if you will. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Anthony Geraci. Thank you for joining us, Anthony. So, Anthony, it's interesting. I did a little research on title companies. This is very, very small segment of the insurance business. The auto insurance, for example, is something like $65 billion a year. Title insurance, the top 5 companies, which First American, Fidelity, Old Republic, Chicago, and Stewart, which do about 75% of the business, only underwrite probably about a $1.5 billion in policies every year. But boy, is it a critical part of the real estate process, shall we say. So, Anthony, I know you've had just tremendous amounts of experience on this. Let's start with sort of the basic question. Title policy is an insurance policy. Is that correct?
You're absolutely correct, Mark. You have to have title insurances in at least 1 to 4 family, but honestly, it's recommended for pretty much any property in the United States. If you don't have insurance, then you don't know exactly what you've got. And if nothing else, it'll cover whatever your loan or the owner, if you have the owner policy, in any coverage that it qualifies for.
So, can you just elaborate a little bit? There's a bunch of different policies. This is something that I didn't really realize until I was in the industry, actually inside or in the industry. You have in California, you have the CLTA policy, you have the ALTA policy. What's the difference and what does that even mean?
Yeah, so CLTA stands for California Land Title Association. And as you can imagine, ALTA stands for American Land Title Association. And both of these are kind of a body of regulatory people that try to put together what are common coverages that you would expect on properties. And they range anywhere from mineral rights to even different types of loans. Like, of course, and we'll probably get into it, different endorsements that I would recommend to you or lenders as far as usury or location, or even owners, like who actually owns this property. And title insurance at its base level is, if you will, shifting the risk of loss from you, if you don't have right title, to that title policy or to the title insurance carrier.
And who usually sells title policy? I mean, when we talk about life insurance or something, or fire insurance, you go to State Farm or somebody like that. But title policies, are they? Who's presenting those title policies to the buyer of the property? And by the way, who pays for the title policy?
Yeah, that's a good question. It can get confusing. So there's certain states like Florida that actually have title agents. And what they do is they kind of close title in their own names. So it almost feels like there's hundreds of these title insurance companies. But kind of what you're saying, Mark, is the top 5 title insurance companies really control most of the market. And a lot of these agents are actually bound to these different title insurance companies. And so the title insurance company is usually bought by the owner of the property. And typically there's, I would say, 2 bodies of policies, if you will. One is an owner's policy, either CLTA or ALTA owner's policy. And then you also have the CLTA or ALTA lender's policy. And they cover 2 different things. One covers, of course, the owner. The other one covers the lender.
So just really to just touch on this, you're buying a house, which is the most common transaction I think people get involved with title insurance. You're new to this process. You're the buyer. You have an escrow agent. You have a real estate broker that's representing you, and you also are getting a loan. So you're going to typically get a CLTA policy for a home purchase. Will your lender also require a title policy as well? Will there be 2 title policies?
Well, they are 2 distinct policies, so it's 2 separate fees, but they're all wrapped in within one, and they have 2 different rights. So the owner, of course, has their own rights. The title company is ensuring them that they have valid title to the property, and a few other things. Now, there's a lender's policy, which is kind of like an endorsement on top of that to the lender, and there could be any number of things that the lender is covered as a result of any loss or whatever endorsement or coverage that they request from the title company to cover as a result of that loan.
Okay, so what I really like to talk about today, Anthony, is what is going on relative to California title policies, because most of the transactions, I would say all the transactions that I deal with are within the state of California. So in that circumstance, you're buying a house, you get a title policy. If you've looked at one of these policies, the first thing you get is what's called a preliminary title report. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And
That's correct.
what does that tell you?
Yeah, so preliminary title report is the first report you get on the property, and it's kind of a lay of the land, forgive the pun, of where this property is and what liens or encumbrances or easements or anything affecting that property is as part of that policy. And there could be things that still exist or things that they think still exist and should be gone on that report.
So those would be, like, give me an example. You would buy this house, but you don't have rights to the mineral rights, for example. Those are gone. You don't get those.
If they've been sold, of course, some properties, I guess you could still have those mineral rights, but as you can imagine, a lot of these homeowners, especially in Texas, California, Oklahoma, anywhere where there was perceived value in the dirt below the ground, those rights have been sold generally in the 50s and 60s to somebody, and those would be recorded on property, because what has to happen is anything that transacts with real property has to be recorded in the recorder system of each county, of each state.
Okay, so water rights would be another one. So there's 2 sections of these preliminary reports. There's a Schedule A, and then there's a Schedule B. The B is generally titled exemptions. So these would be, you're getting clear title to the property without, say, you don't get clear title. There's still like property taxes ahead of you, for example. There's you're not getting clear title for things like, well, we touched on mineral rights, water rights. There may be easements across the property that impinge your rights as an owner. Those types of things.
You got it. So there's quite a few different things as well. I like to say title reports are a lot like credit reports that I think most people can identify with. It's a snapshot in time as of the date it was pulled, and then you're exactly right. What is going on with this property? mineral rights, you'll still see some what they call CC&Rs, covenants and restrictions on maybe, there used to be different segregation laws, of course, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and so there's recommendations of saying those are illegal. There could be, besides taxes, there's something known in California as Melrose. This was a bond program back in the 70s and 80s that would anticipate, we will take this bond in exchange for increased property taxes for the next 40 years. So you still see some of those Melrose things still on title as well.
Okay. So when you're buying a piece of property, as a property buyer myself, I'm not happy with the CLTA policy. I don't think that covers enough. I want an American Land Title Association policy. Anybody, I guess you can Google the differences. But for example, one of the things the ALTA covers to you that the CLTA does not is unrecorded easements. For example, there may be something on there that isn't showing up, but we've run into this where we've bought property and there was an easement. It was not recorded. The ALTA covers that and a CLTA does not. Another thing that ALTAs cover is indexing, which is the order of recordation for encumbrances on the property. This is something that's more important to lenders. But I do think, Anthony, if you could tell us a little bit about the difference between these policies. And I understand there's even I don't even know how to describe this, but there are different types of ALTA policies. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
You got it. So I'll break it into two of those things. That's a long topic there. So ALTA versus CLTA. They're two different, as I said, bodies of regulatory people who have different opinions on what should or should not be covered by title insurance companies. CLTA is going to really focus on just what California, so California-centric type things, and American Land Title Association, or ALTA, really is a body of regulation where it applies to most of the other states. So I completely agree with you. ALTA would cover unrecorded liens as well as indexing. And then what you were asking about is there's even different things on top of that. And so there's this concept called endorsements to a policy. And so you can get the regular policy of either CLTA or ALTA, but I can tell you just from experience, even their basic policy is not enough coverage. You're going to want to actually dig down and get certain endorsements. I have a few favorites that I'm sure we'll get to, but all these endorsements, if you will, cover additional items that either may be on your title policy or may not. There's something like surveys, for instance. Are you sure that you own the land as it is drawn in the legal description? We are still of the, if you will, British system, which has legal descriptions, and so we measure the properties, and we still have different relationships with those measurements, and they are all over the place, as you can imagine. I've seen over 20,000 of these different Exhibit A's, if you will, legal descriptions of properties, and there's different references and different relationships depending on the local knowledge of the land at the time.
Interesting. So give me an example of some of your favorite endorsements. I'm assuming you never are satisfied with the CLTA. You want the ALTA, and then what are the 3 or 4 endorsements that you think are very important? And by the way, listeners, title companies have something like 300 endorsements that are added to these policies. And this is something that's rarely discussed unless you're very sophisticated when it comes to buying this insurance. Most real estate agents are not really familiar with this. And I wonder if you could just shed some light on that for us, Anthony, in terms of what you, at a very minimum, recommend, and what should a buyer of property insist on from the title policy that's being given to them by the seller?
Yeah, those are great questions. And so some of those also depend on some of the risks that may be part of the project. Because as you imagine, like a title, the preliminary title report is a snapshot in time. So too is any property. We get this property now, or buyers are buying the property now. What are they really buying? And as you can imagine, we've probably seen all kinds of different things. Mark, you've been around a long time. You could be buying a single family residence that's completed and ready for a new family to move in, or we could be buying vacant lot with some things that we need to tear down buildings or anything in between, right? So really the start of any title policy is knowing what are you buying and what are you expecting as part of this property. So some of my favorites, and I think these are kind of basic to buyers as well as maybe some lenders as well, is there's a ALTA 9 endorsement, which that's really just the location endorsement. Is this the same address that we think it is, both common, and does the legal description match what it should be? And then remember what we're doing when we get an endorsement, we're saying, hey, if for some reason this is challenged, title insurance is going to cover our loss or pay our defense, whatever happens there. The other one I like is Alta 22, and a lot of that one as well is really, do you have the map? You know, because we have these legal descriptions that aren't just. I wish you could say like longitude or latitude, but you've probably seen some crazy descriptions as I have that they will go back from the 1800s and try to describe where this land should be.
Yeah, they're
I mean,
done
who
in
who
meets
really knows
and
that?
bounds. Yeah. What we
Exactly.
do now, listeners, is I never buy anything, even my personal residence, without getting a survey. You just don't know what encroachments your neighbors have, or encroachments that you are encroaching on others. You would agree with me on this, I'm sure, Anthony, that oftentimes property is presented by the seller, and what you think you're getting and what you actually are getting are quite a bit different.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I will. Let's start with the innocent, right? Most of us who are walking to buy a property, in whatever state it is, either it's going to be fully built or even if it's, you know, a project, there's usually walls, right? We usually have fences or walls around our properties. Well, did that wall actually go where the survey said it should? Is it actually on that line where the survey said it should be? Or is
Exactly.
it
Yep.
1 inch, 10 inches, 2 feet, or 10 feet over? And how long has it been? And then if that becomes an issue, is everybody okay with that 10 footage overage? Because literally you'll have that subdivision plot and everybody is 10 feet over. And so usually it's not an issue, but could be at some point in the future. And that's kind of exactly what you're talking about, encroachments and easements. That's Form 28. That's another one of my favorites as well to get in the title policy.
So that's the ALTA 28 endorsement.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is when our listeners are listening to this podcast, it's important to make sure that when you are buying something, and let's face it, when you're buying any piece of real estate, generally it's a pretty big transaction for most people. And I have just seen endless problems from these, the neighbor or the seller is doing something where they're representing something that just isn't the case, and you go in on this, and if you're not really clear, either through surveys or you're buying insurance to protect your interest here, that you have you have some backstop if you get down the road and you're not happy with what you've ended up with.
I can't agree more. And here would be the sad part, right? If let's just say you buy a house, you move your family in, and you're living there 2 or 3 years, and then your neighbor comes in and say, "Hey, why is this house here? I own that part." And you can have entire pieces of your house built on someone else's land. Imagine if you didn't have title insurance. Now, any lawsuits or payments to either try to get the property or the worst case scenario, having to destroy pieces of your house to be legal within that property just is crazy to me, especially for the, I would say, in cheap sum to buy title insurance for it.
So let's just say you're first time home buyer, you've never really dealt with title insurance, you're represented by a broker. As someone who's done lots of real estate transactions, I would go to the broker and I'd say, hey, you know, I'm very specific about what I want in terms of title. And oftentimes the seller will say, well, and it may be in the contract, hey, I'm only going to provide you with a CLTA policy. As the buyer, can you demand a different type of policy, or what's your feeling on that, Anthony?
You absolutely can. Now, generally, there's a purchase agreement, so hopefully you would negotiate this up front because there's the title policy and who pays for it. I've seen sellers usually pay for the title policy in homes, but could be, each pay 50%. I mean, a contract is contract when it comes to anything. So whatever you agree to, you could. But let's say you've agreed to a CLTA policy. You could always go back and say, you know what, I want an ALTA policy. They're generally more expensive, and no one's going to object to you paying the difference for it.
Yeah, and I think it's important also that not only do you want an ALTA policy, but you may very well want to make some requests on some of these specific endorsement. Anthony, does the title rep, a lot of times buyers don't understand that in California, most title companies have what they're called title reps. These are, I guess, they're agents for the title company. They come out and they actually coordinate with the buyer's real estate broker to provide the title, or they're doing it for the seller. Is that the person that you would go to as the buyer and say, I need an ALTA and I need an ALTA 9 endorsement and I need an ALTA 28 endorsement? And what other endorsements do you supply? Those are the questions. As a buyer, a new buyer, not totally sophisticated, who do you go to on those requests?
That's a good question. So, generally speaking, in every purchase, there's, if you will, four parties, for lack of a better word. You're going to have the buyer, which is hopefully you. There's going to be a seller who's selling the property. And then, of course, besides the agents themselves, you are now what they call opening escrow, right? So, there's going to be an escrow agent. With the escrow agent, they will go exactly what we were talking about at the very beginning of this conversation. We'll have a preliminary title report. And within that preliminary title report, they have now opened title through some title company. You could go through a title representative, or let's just say your broker is unaware, or maybe they don't have that knowledge. Within that preliminary title report is going to be a title officer's name and email. That person you can contact, and while they're not there to necessarily sell title policies like a representative would be, like you're talking about, Mark, you could call them, and I can tell you, just as an attorney, but even as anybody else, they're very knowledgeable. And if there's something you want to ask about, they'll usually spend the time to say, yeah, if you want that covered, we have 22 endorsement or 27 or 32, whatever that number is, and we can endorse around that issue.
Yeah, I think that's important for buyers to recognize that this is, it's funny to me that these title companies sell this, and they very rarely go out of their way to make it known to a prospective property buyer that that these policies can be enhanced, if you will, that you can buy more coverage. It's fine. I've had title reps where I've said, hey, give me a list of all of your endorsements. I'm just curious what endorsements can I buy? As I had mentioned earlier, there's something like 300 for most of the major title companies. And it seems to be a real chore for them to produce these things. I've never understood that, but if you're a first-time buyer, not sophisticated, you don't know what you're asking for, is this something that you would go to your agent for? I mean, for example, let's say you're buying a house and you go in the backyard and it was advertised that the house had a large yard, and you go back there and you think, wow, you know, it looks like that fence line has been moved. And And this is exactly something that you're going to go and get an ALTA survey and find out exactly what's going on. But you have to know to ask, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely ask your agent, but I also encourage people, as funny as this may sound, is there are such great tools nowadays from what I think is labeled AI, but I'm just going to go with large language models like ChatGPT and Grok that you can go ask them. And I caution everybody that they're never going to be 100% certain, and AI can lie to you. But to get general knowledge, to at least get conversational about these things, these tools are great to use to at least go and get some basic knowledge about, hey, I have a concern about the fence line, like you were talking about, Mark. Can you guys tell me, or can you tell me, AI or Grok or whatever it is, what title policy should I request and what endorsement should I request if I have concerns about this? It's
Yeah,
a great
that's an
starting point.
excellent suggestion. I found that I use Chat GPT 5 version 5 now, and it's remarkably good. If you were to ask it, hey, I want to get an ALTA policy regarding a border dispute or issue, what endorsement would I use? And it generally will come up with that. That's a great suggestion. I hadn't even thought of that. So let's go through a couple of other questions. Just in general, do you know what I guess we could look this up as well, but a CLTA covers like what, 5 things?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd have to look it up myself. I don't know exactly what the
I know
CLTA
it's
covers at
matters of
face value.
record. I don't know, I think there's 5 things. There's 10 in an ALTA. One thing I did want to ask you, Anthony, that I found really almost a little unnerving. These preliminary title reports that you're given, what should I say? They're not, you can rely on them sort of, but the title companies don't stand behind these, what they call prelims. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. Yeah. What they're trying to say is, hey, here's everything that we think is on title. But if you read the fine print, so, and this literally does change depends on what the title company you're using. You'll either see it in those exceptions like we were talking about, or you could even see a general section on right after Part B where it says, we are not covering anything that we're not aware of, which is crazy because then what am I getting title insurance for, right? Part of this title insurance is you guys are supposed to know what's affecting this property. So I know what to ask for to be covered by, and that should be part of the service. So when they say that, then the question becomes, well, gosh, am I kind of on my own? And that's where I absolutely encourage everybody read those preliminary title reports. They're long, I know, they're 40 to 50 pages, but this is what you are covered on and not covered on, and it's definitely recommended, especially if this is one of your largest purchases of your life as a buyer, to read this and then get educated and then push back on the title company and say, no, I need this covered, what can you offer me?
So one thing that I've found, Anthony, that's frustrating about title companies. So you're under pressure to close. You get the prelim, which is non-binding. The title companies, they basically tell you, hey, consumer, this is our, what I would say, best guess of what's going on there. But it's not, you can't really rely on it. There is a term in the title policy, which is you get a prelim, and then the next thing you can get that you can rely on is called...
Closing protection letter, like the in
No,
between before the
is it
title
a...
puzzle.
Anyway, so there's another level of report that you can rely on. And then you close the deal, and oftentimes you don't get the policy to even be able to look at it for sometimes a month.
Yeah, you got it.
What do you recommend? The policy comes, you look through it. Gee, this isn't the ALTA policy that I ordered. It's a different policy. So statutorily, do you have some time to go back to the title company and say, hey, my escrow instructions were specific on what I was asking for and you didn't give it to us, what do you do?
Yeah, if you have escrow instructions on specifically what you want and they didn't give it to you, you have, insurance is quasi contract, right? So you have contract rights along this. You would have 2 years to go back to the agency and say, hey, you were supposed to do this. This didn't happen. Please endorse me for it or give me evidence that this is going to be covered from this point forward. I would, as soon as I discover it, absolutely, I would go back to them and show that they didn't do it. Most title companies, especially if you show evidence that they agreed to it, they're gonna quickly agree. They're gonna quickly make that happen for you.
By the way, listeners, I want to make sure that you understand that when you buy a piece of property, you're dealing with lots of parties. You're dealing with, the seller, the lender, the insurance company. It's very important, and Anthony, you could maybe even jump in here, but it's very important that you give written instructions to the escrow officer that says, I am buying this property at this price, at this, under these terms from this person, and I am expecting to get title insurance with the following protections, if you will.
Absolutely. So I would recommend either broker or even you individually get, for lack of a better word, like an owner's closing letter. And you take the preliminary title report and you take what you expect. And maybe if we take about 10 steps backward, I truly believe that every property has a story. There's a reason you're buying it, or there's something you know about the property, and hopefully you've at least asked enough questions to know, hey, what happened with this property the last few years? Anything I should know about? That kind of stuff. Those are the questions you're going to want to take to a title company and say, hey, maybe 10 years ago there was a gas station across the street and that's gone now. Maybe I want some environmental protections in my owner's policy, that kind of stuff. That would be the time to request a title policy and say, hey, I know you've given me basic options. I need the following because this is what I've heard about the property. And then also on this preliminary title report, you're trying to tell me that you're going to have on the title policy that maybe someone's rights that weren't extinguished in the 1800s could somehow come back and now they can take the property from me. No, title agency, I want you to cover that and I'm willing to pay X dollars for that endorsement to cover that problem. And so you take that preliminary title report and use that as a basis of instruction to tell the title insurance company exactly what you want.
When does title come into actually enter into the picture? So let's keep it simple. You're buying a single family residence, it's a first transaction. You tour the house, you have a broker, the broker puts an offer in on your behalf, the seller agrees, they sign a purchase and sale agreement. When does the title enter into the picture? When does that happen?
Well, that's a good question. So contractually, you're actually talking about title from the very beginning. So in most purchase agreements, they're going to talk about who the title company is going to be. So that's usually in your purchase agreement, as well as who's going to pay for that title policy. Typically seller in, I would say, residential, but could be anybody depending on whatever agreement you make. And so once that's agreed to, and by the way, usually the brokers usually select a title company because they already have a relationship with these people. That does not mean, buyers, that you have to use them. If you have somebody, you could absolutely go back to the seller and say, no, I want to use this title company. It's all negotiated for a contract. Putting that aside, so you've agreed to it in the contract of who you're going to use and what the price is going to be and who's going to pay for it. And then what happens is generally a couple weeks after you open escrow, when the paperwork really starts going, that's when escrow is going to contact that title company and order what we've been talking about, that preliminary title report. And within, could be 24 hours, usually 3 days to sometimes a week, depending on where you're at, you'll get that preliminary title report from the title company.
And then you're going to review that. You're going to look at the Schedule A. The Schedule A is what it covers. Schedule B are the exemptions, things that are exempt from coverage. Those would be, you get ownership, but you still have the encumbrance of property taxes, or maybe there's a utility easement or whatever. By the way, listeners, title companies used to, I don't know if they still do this or not, but they used to plot easements so you could see where they were. I always get an ALTA survey, which is done by a third-party survey company. I just ordered one, just to give you an idea of pricing on this, just ordered one on a property that we're buying. The survey, just the survey was $13,000. So I think for a home, it's probably going to be less than that, but it's not cheap. On the other hand, it can save you a lot of headaches later. So you get this title policy, you review it. Should you have an attorney review it? Anthony, what do you think?
It depends. Of course, everybody's expecting the attorney to say, yes, you need all attorneys always. No, if it's a single family residence and there's not, or I would say if it's a basic story, right? It's a neighborhood, there's nothing unique about it. You could probably get away with not having an attorney. But where things go awry, and especially where you may want to get an attorney, is if there's a story to the property. And let's break that down. The stories could be anything from, hey, we're getting a really good deal because it needs to be rehabbed. Like there's some work that needs to be in the property. Are you mid construction? Is it mid rehab? The cautionary tale there is mechanics liens. If you don't know about it, you may not know that a workman worked on this property, say plumbing or HVAC, and their stuff is there. They've installed it, but the person who's selling it is trying to do a fire sale, trying to get out of there, and you may be buying a property that could be subject to a mechanics liens in the next 60 days and not even be aware of it.
Yeah, that's
So
a
if
really excellent example, Anthony, because what a lot of people don't realize is the mechanics lien may not be showing up on title, but the vendor, the HVAC plumber person, actually has a 60 or 90 day window to put a lien on the property, and it will be senior to loan that you got as the buyer, and you as the new owner of the property are going to have this lien that has to be cured.
You got it. Now, I like what you said there because a lot of lenders are aware of this, right? So they're in some ways going to look out for the owner because they're going to want the same coverage generally that an owner gets. They don't want mechanics liens on this property to be senior to them. They want to make sure that, hey, my loan is going to be in the lien that I expect. But maybe it's this fire sale amazing deal that you pay all cash for. You saved up your hard-earned money, $200,000 on what's worth a $400,000 or $500,000 house. There's no lender to protect you, and these are kind of the decisions you have to make without a loan and make for yourself.
Yeah, but it's really important to understand the pitfalls, and as the buyer of the property, I have found these title insurance companies, and I hate to say it because there are a lot of nice reps out there and so on, but I don't really think that they do their best to look out for the interests of buyers. They very much limit their exposure unless you really tie them down.
You're absolutely right. And you really have to be knowledgeable about what they offer because while they offer it, they're not going to say and look out for your best interest. Hey, I reviewed Section B, which is the exceptions. You know what I recommend? You should get A, B, C, and D. No one is doing that for you. Even for lenders, right? That's part of why we're hired is we look out for lenders and we tell them what endorsements they should have as part of their loans. And so, yeah, you absolutely need to be savvy. And if you're not going to do it, I can tell you, unless you hire an attorney or some advisor like that, nobody's going to look out for you.
Yeah, I think the cautionary tale, I've been doing real estate transactions and loans transactions for almost 45 years. And until I got into the lending business, I really did not appreciate the lack of, I don't know what I'd call it, the lack of concern for the buyer or the lender's interest from the title companies. They are remarkably unconcerned about your well-being. Let's just put it that way. How do you pay for title insurance? It's not like an auto policy. You don't pay monthly, right? You pay what, one time?
Yep, you pay one time. The only exception to that is on an ongoing construction. So in ALTA, there's this endorsement called 33. So for each disbursement to the builder, there's a charge. But that's very rare. Most of the time, it's a one-time fee that you pay for as an owner up front for the entire coverage period,
You know,
as long as
one
you own
thing
the property.
Anthony, just sorry to cut you off there, but one thing I've always found interesting about the buyer-seller transaction relationship is that the seller is paying for the insurance, but the insurance benefits the buyer. I always thought that was kind of interesting when you dig into it. I mean, normally when you buy insurance, it's the person paying for the insurance is the one that's benefiting from the coverage. So it's almost as if you're putting the buyer and seller at odds from the very beginning, because the seller wants to sell the property with the lowest costs associated with the transaction. So he's going to buy the least expensive coverage, effectively insurance that covers the least amount of things because that's the cheapest. And the buyer wants just the opposite.
You got it. I mean, it's, I guess, like every insurance policy, right? But what title insurance companies really did well is convince the government, hey, when you're buying these properties, you must mandate title insurance. And so as a result of a lot of these transactions, title insurance is mandated for some basic coverage. But think of it like your auto policy. Well, what is that? You're mandated to have $15,000 in coverage. Well, as we all know, if it's a really bad accident, $15,000 is not going to go a long way. And what does that mean? And so I think that's also a cautionary tale, is especially with buyers, is like, are you getting what you expect to get? And I don't mean for just title. I mean, that's any insurance, right? We always think we're covered, but what are you covered for? And that's kind of what we're talking about, the endorsements and everything like that. You really need to at least look and review and think about and then understand what you've got. And do you feel you're sufficiently covered for whatever risk is that property going to give you?
Yeah, that's right. And I think the difficulty I have with this conversation for first-time buyers or people that don't do a lot of transactions is that they don't even know where to start to ask what they need. And I think that's kind of, I don't know, it's frustrating. You almost feel like you say, look, if you're going to buy a piece of property, you really need to have an attorney going through the purchase and sale agreement document that you're using and exploring or asking, what are the issues? What are the risks that I'm taking on with this property? So on. Let's talk about collecting. You buy a policy. I don't think people realize how hard it is to collect on a title policy. You know, when you buy auto insurance and your car's totaled, you might argue with the title or the insurance company a little bit, but you're going to get a check within 30 days. Tell us about title policies, Anthony.
Well, 30 days might be very optimistic for title. And so I hate to be that guy, but let's keep in mind what insurance companies are. They're a company, right? So every company generally profits. So how does an insurance company make money? Title insurance companies in particular make money off the premiums we're talking about, right? You pay a premium and you shift that risk of loss to the title company. So what do? They take all that money and they generally invest in other things to grow interest and if you will, income to pay for their bills and, of course, have profit. So, what does insurance companies really hate to do? Lose money. How do they lose money besides overhead? Paying your claims. So they don't really have much of an incentive to pay your claims. And gosh, I don't know. We could have an entire hour long conversation just on this one. But title companies in particular have been very ingenious in figuring out ways to have armies of their own attorneys. And so they will be their own firms, they'll hire attorneys for the sole purpose of, you know what, we're going to litigate every claim because they have employees, so they've flat feed their cost. And if they could delay it out 18 months, well, that's 18 months of interest or whatever revenue they've earned on their premiums to now pay you later for the same amount of money.
Yeah, I'd say 18 months from my experience, Anthony, is fast. I
For
don't
sure.
think people really quite understand. Some of these claims go out, 5 years before they're settled or paid for, even when the title company is clearly obligated to pay. It's very, very frustrating. I guess that's the way the industry works. And it's very important, though, buyers of policies or the recipients of the insurance to make sure that you are spelling out in writing exactly what this insurance company is obligated to do. And then once you get your policy, you are also really obligated to make sure that you get the policy that you asked for in writing, along with the endorsements. It seems like a big burden, Anthony, for the consumer to have to do that. How is it that they can get away with that?
Yeah. Well, like anything, right? Insurance has to show good faith. And there's a whole body of law about bad faith insurance companies. And so what they will always argue is, well, we have a good faith reason to argue this because blank. And as you can imagine, insurance companies will push that good faith to the limits as much as they can. You see it everywhere from, well, no, there's a real argument about whose lot line that is. That should be your lot line. It's not theirs. We're going to litigate it. All the while knowing it may not be, and they're going to have to pay to settle the claim and transfer that to you or something else. And so again, the name of the game for any insurance company is how do I delay payments? And title insurance companies get away with it generally because at least for most claims, it's going to be either the entire property, right? The entire property is not usable. You've moved on to something, and so that'll be some sort of litigation, or something so minor that it's tolerable. Like you could live with a fence line or in litigation for 2 years because you're still enjoying your property. But yeah, that the same type of thing is still at play. Insurance companies are trying not to pay, and they're trying to pay as late as possible.
So, Anthony, just to sum up here, what do you think the biggest mistake people make in dealing with this particular insurance policy, title insurance? What is it that you would advise them to avoid if you can? I mean, what are they looking for?
Yeah, so that's a tough question, right? So even after you've gone through the Schedule B, you've done all you can to get educated, you've got all the endorsements you can, and now you get a covered claim. Then, generally speaking, what title is going to do is give you what they call a reservation of rights letter. Well, we're going to take this under advisement. We don't think that this is covered, and for myriad reasons, they're going to do as little as possible. And I really want to warn people, it's really keep in mind their insurance company, right? So their goal is to pay as little, do as little for the most premiums. So here's a couple of things, if you will, to avoid is if you don't put it in writing. So this is a common mistake I've seen, not too much anymore, but especially if you're new, you're going to make this problem. Well, when I have a problem, I want to call somebody. So I'm going to call somebody and get them on the phone and say, "Hey, I've got this claim." "Okay, sir, we're going to talk to you about it." and they take your information and you never hear about it again. And so you think they're handling it. 4 months go by, nothing's happened. And you wonder, you call in, it's like, hey, what's going on with my claim? And it's like, well, we have no record of your claim, sir. Because if you read your title policy, any claims show that you must put it in writing and you must send it to the address. That's really, really important in any claims. You can't just make a phone call. You have to mail it, and you should have evidence that you mailed it to put them on notice. So once you have that, then if you will, the clock starts ticking for the title company or to either do something about this. Are they paying a claim? Are they defending you in some lawsuit? It depends on the nature of the claim and the nature of what's at stake. But that's when the time starts ticking for title companies, not when you make a phone call. So that's probably one of the largest mistakes I've seen out there. The other thing that I wouldn't do also is to take the title company's word for it, right? Oh, you're going to be covered, what have you. This is definitely the time where you should have an attorney, and especially one that specializes in title insurance. You don't want to talk to them about what your rights could be. So keep in mind what a title policy is. It's a shift of loss, right? You're shifting the risk from you to them. And whatever's covered in that, they're going to cover you. How they cover you, kind of within those bounds of good faith and fair dealing, could be hiring a defense for you or paying the claim. Now, Mark, you and I know this for a long time. Their goal is to, well, how do I not pay the less as much as possible? Let's hire the defense. So they'll hire you attorneys. And again, like we talked about, they already have them on payroll. And so their goal is to do as little as possible for as long as possible. And an experienced title insurance attorney is going to know this. And then within a certain amount of time, they're going to push for a third-party counsel, which would be me, or any title company, to really represent your interests in the dispute between whatever that dispute is and the attorney representing you and the title insurance company for that dispute.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. That's probably true of all insurance companies, but when you're buying the insurance, make sure it's in writing exactly what you want, what endorsements you want, what you're concerned about. The concern question, I think, should be addressed to your real estate agent. Hey, I'm a little worried about the driveway being wide enough for my vehicle. Do I actually have use of the entire driveway? Just an example. What about all these trees on my property? Are those on my property or on my neighbor's property? Those types of questions going in, you can get insurance endorsements that will cover that. On the back end, once the deal is finalized, make sure you get your policy. You have it safe somewhere in the future. Read it, compare it to what you asked for. So are the endorsements that you asked for in there? Is it actually an ALTA policy, etc.? And then if you do have a claim, don't talk to the insurance company, send everything in writing. And I would say that at this point, if you're making a claim, you should be dealing with an attorney. Don't you agree with that, Anthony?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think, and I love real estate agents, have quite a few real estate agents as friends, and with due respect to them, they're not the most educated even on title insurance, right? They know real estate, they know values, and they are very much experts at that. But even these type of questions, your real estate agent, your friends, this is really still an attorney's game, understanding title and protecting you. And then, of course, when you make a claim, when something is covered, again, yeah, this is definitely something you're going to want to hire an attorney for. If they are covered under that, as we were alluding to, is that an experienced title insurance attorney can require them to pay for even my fees, even though they already hired you a defense. If it's still a dispute or they have reservation rights, you can actually have them pay for my fees, which is solely there to represent your interests and ensuring you get what you bargained for when you bought this policy in the first place.
Yeah, that's excellent advice, Anthony. We've had an awful lot of fun this afternoon talking about a subject that many would consider rather dry. I find it fascinating. I have learned so much in dealing with title companies and having you work with us on it, Anthony. I feel that probably over the last 10 years, I've learned more about title policies than anybody should probably know. And I have also found that it's quite difficult to collect from insurance companies. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to put your contact information on our website. Is it Anthony Geraci at, you're out on a new firm, by the way. Congratulations. Is it Geraci Law, or what are we calling it?
Nope, it's now still, it's funny. I call it 2.0, but it's Geraci LLP still. So it's Anthony at GeraciLLP.com. And so you can find us at www.GeraciLLP.com. I've got a couple new associates, and 2.0 is shaping up to be, even better than the first one. So I'm looking forward to growing and going with everybody.
Listeners, I met Anthony 25 years ago, just starting out version 1. I'm so excited to see how you do with version 2, Anthony. Are you available if listeners have a complicated question about title insurance?
Absolutely. Yeah, please feel free to call me, or as I said, email me is probably the best way at anthony@GeraciLLP.com. Happy to take time. I don't charge for, basic questions or consultations. Happy to say I can help, or just say, hey, I don't think you've either got a claim or I can't help right now. But any basic title questions, just send them my way. Happy to answer as part of the service.
I know that we've relied on Anthony. Pacific West Mortgage Fund has just done tons and tons of business with Anthony over the years. He's been so helpful in keeping us out of trouble with this particular subcategory of real estate. It's such a little tiny slice of real estate, but it's so important, because when it blows up on you and you haven't got yourself in the right spot, it's really it's a long, drawn-out process. So with that, Anthony, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I'm hopeful that we can have you back talking about more exciting topics in the real estate world.
I would love to be here, and thank you for having me. Always look forward to it, Mark. It's been such a pleasure to know you so long, and love seeing you grow as well, and all the great things you're doing at Pacific West Mortgage Fund and the Granger Company. So thanks for having me.
All right, Anthony. Take care of yourself. So thank you for joining us, Pacific West Mortgage Fund's Title Insurance episode. Stay tuned. We have lots of new material coming out. We have just launching a new podcast, Other People's Money, with Kevin Kim at Fortra Law. Very, very interesting topic, timely for anyone that's thinking about syndicating. Once again, stay tuned. We have lots of new material coming out. We're looking forward to working with you. And thank you for joining us.